Once upon a time,
in a land far away.
I'm Katrina.
And I'm Geoff.
This is the Fairy Tellers Podcast.
Myth, legend, folklore, fable.
We explore what they say about cultures then and now,
Grab a hot cup of cocoa and a comfy seat
while we tell you a tale.
Welcome back to the podcast. So excited for yet another exciting episode. Excited for an exciting episode that is redundant, but true.
Thanks for everybody's patience. I'm still working on fixing up my janky basement. We had some crazy months like we usually do, but then we also had a weekend where we got to record with Not My Fantasy podcast, which hopefully will be coming out, I think they said at the end of October or beginning of November, because their schedule also got a little crazy. We went to record with them. We had set aside a date to record with them, and we were about like 30 minutes into not recording, but kind of like getting set up and talking about how everything was going to go. And then Cullen, the host of Not My Fantasy podcast, he just kind of like disappeared.
Yeah, he froze. And Katrina was like, did he freeze for you too? And I was like, I was about to ask you the same thing. And then he stayed frozen, and then he disappeared. And then a cryptic message appeared on screen that said, you are the host now.
Yeah, it was like, Geoff is now the host.
I'm like, I am now the host of Not My Fantasy podcast. I have completed a not so hostile, accidental takeover.
Yeah. A coup d'etat.
And I felt like the power. And it was funny. We stayed in their like Zoom meeting room, just the two of us talking for like 40 minutes, thinking like, hey, maybe he'll come back. Well, and he did get in contact with us.
Yeah. I messaged to be, because after about 5 minutes of like, because, you know, we've all experienced technology. If somebody suddenly disappears from like a group chat, Zoom, FaceTime, Google, whatever, you just assume that they lost internet and they're going to come back on. But after about 5 minutes, he was gone for like a little bit too long to have just
you start to worry, like, have the nukes hit the West Coast? Is that what's going on?
Yeah, like what? Who's attacking us? Is it Russia?
That's where my mind goes immediately. It's like, internet's out? Okay. Oh no, next most likely scenario, nuclear annihilation.
But yeah, so we messaged him, and the power had gone out in like his whole neighborhood, and he didn't get power again until the next day. But at first the power company was saying that they were going to come back online and that it would be fine in like 45 minutes. So we were like, oh, okay, we'll wait an hour for you and then we'll kind of call it. And it's a good thing that we did, because it stayed off for almost a full 24 hours for him. And so, yeah, we weren't going to wait that long.
That's even kind of the later end of the story, because we had such struggles scheduling it in the first place. We had one time scheduled, we were going to record later that night, but then like something really sad happened. In my household, our cat very suddenly was super sick and had to go to the vet, and then had to be put to sleep that day. So I wasn't in a very good place to be having a happy, slappy good time talking about Robin Hood, not even Prince of Thieves, Men in Tights, and like having fun. So they very kindly rescheduled for another day. And then
and I also that weekend wasn't going to be like, oh, Geoff, when you're done being sad about that, can we record a podcast episode?
Yeah.
So yeah, things happened in our lives. Some sad things, some silly things. Got trapped in a witch's tea shop for a while that one day. So we're glad to be back making another podcast episode. But anyway, I hope everybody is ready for this episode, because we had our fun and games last episode talking about eating the rich and turning them into worms. But now we are going back to the French salons, back to the land of the rich and decadent. And them celebrating themselves. And we're going to be talking about racism. When I told Geoff, like, oh, so this episode that we're going to be talking about, it's going to be centered around racism. He was like, I feel
Again?
yeah, I feel like we just did an episode about racism.
So I feel like we're always talking about racism. And it's like,
what's funny is my husband had the exact same reaction where he's like, oh, what are you going to be doing your next episode on? And I was like, oh, it's going to be on racism inside some tales from like the French Solanaires. And he's like, haven't you already done an episode about that? And I was like, very astute of you. Yes.
yeah, it's like even in this specific topic, I was like, you know what? Like, especially in the type of subject matter that we cover, which, you know, I did actually eventually just go, because we're talking about something that involves human beings in the world. Of course, racism is going to come up, but especially when we're talking about a period in the past where they did not feel the same way about these things as we do today. Like it comes up a lot because it was, you know, part of the zeitgeist of their world. So
yeah. And I think what is intriguing and why we are covering the topic is because the specific type of racism and dialogues around race that were in the zeitgeist then is different than now. And so some of it is, it's harder to pick up that that's what they are talking about, which in some ways is like good because you're not connecting it
right, like you're not
in the explicit way that it was connected then, but
right,
also
you're not thinking of the racist thing that they expect you to be thinking because you're not racist in that way.
Yeah. So it's like, oh, good, but also it's also good to be informed. And yeah, I mean, when we say that we're talking, like in this podcast, we talk about cultures then and now, and like the ways in which these fairy tales interacted. You know, it's exactly what we're talking about because it's exactly what we said we're going to talk about at the, you know, the intro to every episode of the podcast. And so I was going to say in episode 114, The Golden Trunk, we started talking about the book Specters of the Marvelous, Race and the Development of the European Fairy Tale by Kimberly J. Lau. And I mentioned in that episode, and I'll mention in this episode too, for the sake of transparency, I did receive Specters of the Marvelous, the book, directly from Wayne State University Press to read it, but I did not promise them a review or an episode or anything. So just so that people know, just so that we're clear of I'm not hawking this book because I was paid to hawk this book. I just like to push books on people. And if I'm going to read this like whole book, I might as well
get some content out of it.
Yeah, get some content out of it. And so in that episode 114, The Golden Trunk, we talked about the racism that was baked into Giambattista Basile's Tale of Tales. We've also in previous episodes during our Snow White series, we talked about the racism that was like start to finish, literally throughout that whole book, because it's the entire frame narrative hinges on racist tropes, and so it actually is pretty like impossible to retell the frame story of the Tale of Tales and not include the racism, because the whole point of it was that it was like, oh, this white princess good and this black person who is like the whole character is like a racist caricature of black people at the time. That character that was created for like the story is like evil and steals the prince away. Like that's the frame narrative is that. And so it's impossible not to talk about the racist tropes in there. And so it was fascinating to read the research and the analysis from Kimberly J. Lau when we then retold The Golden Trunk, which is one of the like the tales inside of like the broader tales and the Tale of Tales. Did I say tales enough?
The tales within the Tale of Tales, Book of Tales.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Totally lost the plot of that whole sentence. But anyway, then in episode 119, Tales of the French Salon, we took a detour to talk about the literary world of the French salons, because I thought before we launched into what today's episode topic is going to be, which is Mary Catherine Delanois, I knew that we would need a little more foundational understanding of what kind of work was coming out of the salons from the salonaires and why it was important and a thing worth studying and knowing about. So if you want to go back up to those episodes, if you haven't listened to them yet, great. But like the majority of the time on this podcast, I'm just going to make it as enjoyable to listen to this one as a standalone episode as any other episode. So if you want all of that kind of like background information, side information to get like a broader scope, you can go do that. If not, no worries. So before we even launch into racism, even though I know everybody's chomping at the bit, Katrina, please give us more. We turned on this podcast for a fun, happy, slappy fun time. Please tell us more racism. But first, I wanted to talk about Mary Catherine Delanois, because she is so fascinatingly interesting of a person. I will say, like, any longer, more elaborate things that you can read about this woman that you can get your hands on, that you can like research, she is worth the deep dive. I am telling you right now. Just because of the intrigue in her life, like the drama of it all going into it. It's super, super fascinating. And she is the type of kind of like girl boss that is like very admirable these days in our time period. Because I'm going to give kind of a very like quick condensed story about this woman.
Yeah, let's hear it.
And I was going to say another book that I have not been paid to tell you guys about. Recently, like as in a couple months ago, a book came out called Women of the Fairy Tale Resistance, The Forgotten Founding Mothers of the Fairy Tale and the Stories That They Spun by Jane Harrington. So if you can get a hold of that, I think there's like an audiobook version of it too. If you can get a hold of that, absolutely do. It's worth having. But yeah, we're not being paid to suggest that book or advertise them. I had just seen that it was going to be coming out soon, and so I had it as like an automatic download. Like when I had pre-ordered it because I was in the middle of doing all of the like Solonaire research when I saw that this book was going to be like coming out, and so I was like, obviously, I'm gonna want to pre-order this book, and it is really great because they have condensed biographies of these different women, and then they also have included some of their tales to go with it. And in terms of like accessibility, like it is a very like easy read, a very enjoyable read. It's written for people who love this subject but aren't academics, which Specters of the Marvelous very much, I would say, like is more geared towards academics. And so yeah, if you want to learn more about this subject but are like, I don't need to have like a big heavy like academics view of this, Women of the Fairy Tale Resistance, The Forgotten Founding Mothers of the Fairy Tale and the Stories That They Spun. You can read some condensed biographies about these women. So anyway, this is my very quick version. Mary Catherine Delanois. She was in an aristocratic family. Her dad worked with the king, and so they were very well positioned. Her mother, it seems, when Mary Catherine Delanois was in like a boarding school, and she was always huge reader and a huge writer. And there are books that exist in these like research library collections that have her marginalia scribbled all inside of them, even from when she was like 10 years old. And some of them, it's like funny because she's like sassy.
That's awesome.
She always big reader, big writer. While she was in like a boarding school, her mom had arranged a marriage for her, and it was an arranged marriage with a much older man, a man who was in like his mid 40s, who had not gotten married up until that point because he was gay, and like very like openly.
Mm-hmm.
And he had not wanted to get married to a woman. Fair enough. Until his money had started to run out and he was in a bad way financially. And so Mary Catherine Delanois was not thrilled. She absolutely hated being married to this man. They did not get along well with each other. But Mary Catherine had several different children and several like losses of children. It was a really rough, like her late teens, early 20s were really, really rough for her because she absolutely loved her children. It wasn't necessary. It doesn't seem like it was the life that she would have picked for herself, but she loved her children, but also child loss was like very common.
Yeah.
And she did not like her husband. Their money, the more tight their money situation got, the meaner her husband got to her. And he also was getting more and more verbally agitated with King Louis XIV.
Uh-oh.
Which you're not allowed to be out loud verbally upset. That it was against the law to be speaking ill of the king. And so Mary Catherine and her mother, they devised a plan where they got some other men to basically like go out, like drinking, smoking cigars, hanging out, talking with each other, kind of gaining the confidence of her husband, and then talking crap about the king. So that they then could have him charged and have these like witnesses against her husband to get him arrested.
Sounds like entrapment to me, but I mean,
well, listen,
whatever.
Well, Geoff, it turns out you're not the only one who thought that that's entrapment, because it was also illegal to try to goad somebody into speaking badly about the king.
Oh, that's good to know that that was actually, taken into consideration.
Yeah. So her husband, he was arrested and tried, and he was like, no, these guys that I met up with, and he was like naming names and stuff. So then when those guys got dragged out, then they gave up Mary Catherine Delanois and the mother.
Uh-oh.
And so they were exiled to Spain because, apparently the king didn't like that they did that. And listen, they were not the only women. There was like another woman of like the French salons who had paid somebody to like kill her husband. And when they failed to like fully kill him, but they got like arrested, they told on her and she like was executed. So
yikes. Well, I mean, she had her husband murdered. I mean, still, that
Yeah,
penalty,
yeah,
whatever,
yeah,
but it's
yeah.
like, but it was a more severe thing than like, I mean, they were basically trying to get him killed.
Yeah.
Well, would that not have been the punishment for speaking bad? Well, maybe just speaking bad about the king. I don't know. I don't know my French.
Yeah, because I'm like, it was like layers. He could have been executed for it, depending on like how publicly he was speaking out. If he had any
like treasonous intent.
Yeah, like if he had been saying to people, we should all get together and stab the king, then like that is like painted death. And so, what she was doing possibly to her husband was like, it could have had really, he could have been killed for it or been in jail the rest of his life or whatever. He ended up not being in jail for the rest of his life, but that's like, that's another thing. They did end up getting divorced. The church eventually granted them like a divorce because it was like the extent to which they like absolutely hated each other and detested each other. It was excessive. And so they actually like did get to have a divorce, but like
church is like, you know what, we're gonna give you this one.
Yeah, which I'm like, it's crazy too, because I'm thinking about because they raised their children together, and in a time when like co-parenting like wasn't a thing, but there were the expectations of like parents of a certain like social standing and stuff to like show up at weddings, show up at christenings, like show up to like these events, helping there, because they had a couple like different daughters too that they had to make sure were positioned well to like marry well. And so it's like they had like so many social engagements that they had to kind of still attend to together, even though they absolutely hated each other, which like he was like, listen, they were both horrible to each other. If it's like physically, verbally, like financially abusive, and then her being like, I'm going to set you up so that you get like arrested. She gets exiled. But then she also was possibly a spy for the Kingdom of Spain.
Love it.
But she could have been, history is unsure if she was like a double agent.
But they're not unsure. So it's like, but there is like some degree of proof more than like people were saying like, oh, she's like her husband planting rumors that she's a spy to get her in trouble. It's like that. It is documented she was a spy, not necessarily clear whether or not she was a double agent or whatever.
Well, yeah, because it's the reason why they're very sure that she like was a spy was because of all of the kind of continued favor that she would get from both the royalty in Spain and in France. So it was like while she was exiled in Spain, but she still was given a certain amount of like creature comforts from France if she would do favors for the crown. Left ambiguous what that meant. But then she was also then being given things from Spain for favors for the crown, which is like, what were those? Like, that's such a weird thing, like to put in like a Venmo, like memo thing of like, what is this for? And it's
I'm going to start putting that in my Venmo memos.
Favors for the crown of Spain. Like, it's like, what? So when we say that she was like exiled to Spain, it wasn't in this kind of like absolute desolation, like, oh, now she's like a poor widow on the streets or something like that of like a foreign country. Like, no, she was still like well situated in society, and she still had access to books and writing and library, and she was writing constantly to people to send, like writing tales to send to her friends, hearing back from them, writing travelogues. And here's a really interesting thing about her is that when she did come back to France, and so she published these travelogues of Spain, because Spain at the time, people in France were like really interested in Spain, and people like in France and in England were like, oh, Spain sounds so wild and exotic. Like, tell me all about it. And so she had written these kind of like travelogues, and travelogues were super, super popular at the time for a lot of different regions. And she was reading a lot of travelogues, which is important to what we're going to be talking about when we're talking about some of the talks of race in her stories, and also how that translates into stories, like other stories that were found in like the French salons, was the fact that there were a lot of travelogues. Some of the most successful travelogues featured the New World. Less interesting to people, oddly, for me to like think about, were stories about common trading partners that they had for like a really long time, like China, where we might think of like, that was probably a foreign country. They were less interested in talking about China
than Spain,
than like Spain, and less than like the New World, because they felt like people in China were a lot more like refined and sophisticated like them, so they felt like they understood them. And one of the reasons why they felt that way was because of like the fine quality goods that they would get from China. Because in like the French salons you could find like fine bone china and like porcelain, and like those high quality items, they were being manufactured in China by these like artisans out there. So they were like, for them there was less wild about people in China than how they felt about people in Spain.
That's so interesting.
Yeah. And definitely in the New World. But I'm like, we'll get ourselves back to there, but back to Madame Delanois. So when she was back in France, there was another time when she got exiled too, where she ended up in I don't know if you'd call it a nunnery or if it was like a monastery. It was more common for women to serve out legal consequences in monasteries than it was for them to go to a prison. And so she kind of was like back and forth, but anytime she was in the French salons, she was big business. Like it was like, yes, she's here. Marie Catherine Delanois is here. She's going to read her stories. She's going to have her stuff. And she was like publishing a lot of different things and had a lot of commercial success doing that. And so her tales in Specters of the Marvelous, they talk about that her worldview, her tales, they did a lot to inform other Solanaires and then other future storytellers. And so it is important to look at her as like a pivotal kind of turning point or like a touchstone down like the generations of like how things went through her.
Mm-hmm.
And in the episode where we talked about, like the French salons, we talked a little bit about how people like the Grimm's brothers would look more at like Charles Perrault. They would look at Charles Perrault and they would be like, oh, he was the real person who, is capturing these like stories, not the like Solanaires. But even they were affected by the tales that came out of the salons by these women. And so it's like, as much as they might want to argue that like, oh no, the tales weren't affected by these aristocratic women. They 100% were. So it's like, okay, dudes, settle down. So yeah, Mary Catherine Delanois, unfortunately, even though her husband was like almost, I think it was like 30 years older than her, she died 5 years after he did, which seems terribly unfair that she would die so young. She died in 1705. She was 53 years old. Or I guess 52. She would have been 53 if she'd gotten to her October birthday. October birthdays, they're the best. Now, moving to the side.
Yeah.
Moving back. So I find that in America, when it comes to talking about the history of the American continent, we really focus on the Britishness of kind of like the whole thing. And unless you live in Florida or Texas, you would almost think that no other countries were spreading out their imperial reach and colonizing all over the globe. But I've also found that if you grow up in any of these European countries, like in the European countries themselves, you also don't learn that much about those imperial histories or the countries that were directly affected by the colonialism. And so I think this topic is, good for a lot of people to learn more about. So when we're talking about France and their imperial reach and the colonizing that was going on, some of the key areas of focus were, for France, the fur trappers and groups that were colonies that were forming in the North American continent. So if people are thinking about like Canada, when we think of like the North, we're thinking like of North America, up in Canada, some around the Great Lakes region, and obviously all the way down to Louisiana, which that's a huge stretch because we're going all the way down the Mississippi, folks. But they didn't necessarily have colonies and established cities in all the way like along that route. A lot of just people working, being like the fur trappers and whatnot. So they also had the sugar plantations in the Caribbean islands, and a scattering of like other enterprises throughout, including religious enterprises. There was a lot of Catholic push to like leave this message of like Christian faith with every people that they came upon. And it's a little frustrating to like read things where they were like, as much of the resources that we took from their lands, we left something much more precious, the Catholic Church. And I'm like, oh, okay. I have some feelings there. But because it's like, you can't suck all of this. You can't exploit all these riches out of people that they could have used for their own trading you're sucking all this wealth out of their nation and then being like, but we left you with the greatest thing of all, Christianity. And it's like, okay, except that they can't feed their people with Christianity. Like they can't enrich their country, and you know that.
Uh-huh.
So anyway, those are my feelings. So some interesting things in Specters of the Marvelous, Race and the Development of the European Fairy Tale that I thought were super interesting, speaking about this area, were a couple of different trains of thought. So at the time when people were learning about the New World and what was there on like the American continent. So the people of France, they were fascinated by the tales that were coming back from what was deemed the New World. Not just stories that were coming in from France, but also like Spanish, Portuguese. They all had
Dutch.
The Dutch. They all had these like, groups that were coming over and rooting up the whole land and doing all kinds of stuff. But they're coming back with stories that were dripping with over embellishments of the riches that could be found. And so in these stories that they would hear that were these travelogues, so not in their minds, not these like made up things, but what was like really being found out there in like these tales. You would have descriptions where you would have these like Spanish tales of cities that were dripping with gold.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the kind of language that they would see, where it was like, there are fruit as large as your face, dripping with golden nectar that speaks of heaven, fountains of silver. People would be bathing in gold dust. There were so many animals that these animals were basically jumping into the traps the moment they were being set down. A net can be dropped into the water and it's filled full to bursting with millions of fish of every color. So descriptions that were just very rich and evocative with this kind of like elements of wonder. Just like,
and people were taking it a little too literally.
Yeah.
This is not hyperbole. This is not figure of speech. They are meaning this 100% literally.
Yeah. And so these stories, like, I feel like to me, like the descriptions, hearing like these, they're almost indistinguishable from what we think of as like fairy tales, because it's like the exact same thing when like the Solanaires were writing their stories, their tales, fairy tales, contemporary to, some of these things coming over. They're also being informed by the things that they have been reading. So when they are inventing these lands of wonder, they're using a lot of that same language that they're reading in these travelogues that people have.
Yeah.
And so you get, like, oh, they were on this island, but this castle made completely of gold, pillars that went almost to the sky. And yeah, just the descriptions. Very, very rich, colorful language, a lot of just over embellishments. And yeah, it's like these travel tales, they were popular. The literate society were like eating them up. And like I said earlier, what's interesting is like some of like the trading partners that they had, like China, even it's like the Dutch had been trading with like the Japanese as well for like hundreds of years. Same like situation where like they saw them as people of refined taste. And so you're very similar to us in terms of like the development that you have like in your country and your sophistication. And so even though the majority of the people who lived in like France had never been to those places either, the travel tales for there less popular with people. They felt like they already kind of had an idea in their head of what those people were like, and so they were less interested. While people in the New World, they were like, I've never even heard of these people. It's like completely wild. And so Lau writes that, quote, while Europe perceived the East to be highly civilized, the New World and its native inhabitants seemed to present a tabula rasa, or a clean slate, ready to be inscribed in any way that Europeans wished. So, again, warning, this episode is about racism.
Remember that.
Please remember. Because I'm like, you're about to hear some things that are racist. Which also, what you're about to hear about is the concept that, like, the discussion around race it is different. How people use the term race is like different through time and also very culturally based. The way that we today even like talk about race is fairly new. The way that we are going to hear race talked about in the story that I'm going to read, they were still using race to describe kind of the difference between like species. Because at first, like the word was usually used around cattle or like anything that you were trying to kind of like domesticate and classify for specific traits. And so when they're using the word race, it was meant in that sense. And so almost this, not even almost, but it was the idea that there are different like species of humans and that you can kind of like divide them out that way.
Right.
In the same way that you would animal.
Yeah. Which like that as the origin makes it even more terrible and gross.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like immediately problematic. Like immediately like, oh, that's not good. And so in a lot of Delanois stories and in the stories like coming out of like the French salons, the boundary between what a human was and what an animal was is very loose, not like a hard boundary. And that is kind of the way too that people were talking about other people from different areas where they were seeing them as animal-like. And so Lau writes that Europeans in New France compared native people's ability to navigate the wilderness as, quote, suspiciously animal-like and an innate instinct, the same as that possessed by animals. And so in that time period, it's like the French people who were on the American continent, they were writing back and telling people in France this in their logs that they're like, oh yeah, it's the people that we're witnessing who are like native to these lands, they're almost more animal than they are human. They're running wild in the woods. It's like they weren't running wild in the woods. They lived there. And this bears out also with some of the writings that were coming back that were from some of the missionaries that were in those areas as well, thinking that they're like, oh, I'm giving this good gift of Christianity like to these people. And they would round up children and kind of be like, okay, here's what here's what we're going to do. We're going to teach you the gospel. We're going to put you in our clothes and we're going to like keep you here, feeding you our food and try to get you to be quote unquote like civilized. And then they would write back saying like, oh, these children, it's like the minute our backs were turned, they like stripped off the clothes that we gave them and just ran back into the woods like animals. And it's like, no, they went back to their families like children who had been kidnapped by missionaries. That's not what's happening. That is not what's going on. And so to go with the story that I'm going to be retelling today, which is Prince Marcassin, the title of this story, it can be translated two different ways because Marcassin in French means a wild boar. And so some people just say Prince Marcassin. And so that it almost sounds like if you don't speak French, you don't know the French word for wild boar. To you, it just sounds like, Prince Charles. Right.
Just sounds like a name.
Yeah, it's just like a name. But of note is that, because we talked in the previous episodes about like in the French salons, they were well aware of fairy tales that had previously been written either by like Giambattista Basile, Strepoli, like they were aware of these like different tale types and they were using them to write different ways, like to explore different topics, whether it's political commentary, whether it was kind of having highbrow philosophical discussions within the tale itself. They were using them as a vehicle to get a message across. And that's important to understand that that's happening so that you can understand that her word choice when she made that decision to have his name be Prince Wild Boar is that this story comes from the Pig King. So the other stories that are like this, it's a domesticated animal. The word that they always would pick would be the French word cochon or pork. It's just funny because it's just pork. Porc. Pork. But cochon, pig, pork is pork. You guys know what pork is, right? You've been heard of pork?
I've heard of pork.
Yeah.
It was one of those things that was fascinating that I learned about, like in English, how we use like the English, like Germanic name for the animal, but the French name for the meat. So it's like, but in whatever, in like French, it's just the name of basically the animal, right? I don't know.
Pork. I think pork is it might just be for the meat.
But it is just interesting how in English we do that and like put the separation between the animal and the meat. It's like, I'm not eating cow. I'm eating beef.
Yeah.
I'm not eating pig. I'm eating pork. Would you like a shredded pig sandwich? A pulled pig sandwich?
Would you like a pulled pig sandwich? No, I'm okay.
Not quite as appetizing.
So Mary Catherine Delanois, by making her king, because it's either like the pig king, king pig, the pig prince, stuff like that. But in hers, she was like, no. It's not a domesticated animal like a pig. He's a wild boar. And so that is like a specific artistic decision that she made for the point of her story. So Lau writes, I want to suggest that Prince Marcassin's narrativization of the tensions implicit in the civilizing process might also be productively understood in relation to the formation of colonial subjects in New France. In this context, Delanois' choice of Marcassin takes on an even greater significance since Huron, the name given to the natives with whom French colonists built alliances, and about whom colonial authorities and missionaries wrote their most extensive ethnographic works, alluded to the practice of shaving the head except for a few small tufts or straight locks like the bristles of a wild boar, as this is what hure signifies in French.
Oh, interesting.
Because also at the same time that dialogues are going on about these kind of like subhuman or non-human like others that are out there, there is also this very popular French concept and like ongoing discussion and debate that people aren't just born in their status and their situation and that's kind of what their capabilities are, but they have the ability to be civilized and Frenchified. There's like a Frenchification. And that's like what it is called, is like Frenchification.
The only thing I want Frenchified is my fries.
Wow.
All right.
And my kissing.
True. Very true.
That's the end. No, we're going to keep that in. But yeah, this idea that there's like a Frenchification that can go on where like, this debate that like, no, they don't have to remain. And I'm sorry about the word I'm about to use, but it is the word that was used. They don't have to remain as savages. They can be turned into civilized human beings. And like that was kind of the discussion that was going on. And so you get a lot of tales in the salon where you have this metamorphosis where like a person is born as like an animal human hybrid. And they're able through a lot of work to not look human, but to have the sophisticated manners of a French person where they'll be taught how to dance and how to dress properly and how to just act in court, bow and curtsy in pleasing ways. And that somehow then makes them more palatable as like human beings. So it's like in that soup of all of that thought, among like other thoughts and debates, because also we'll see in this story the ideas of some feminist thought and like the complications behind marriages and how women are property. Like those things are also coming up, but you'll see all of that in the story. But anyway, I think I've proven enough of my point for now, because I am gonna have more to say, I will tell you, on the idea of, and I'm sorry about saying this as well, race mixing. Because that is something that comes up and was also a topic that was being kind of like debated about if men married women who were in another like group, how they saw like a subhuman group, the children that they would have had a better chance, they believed, of being Frenchified. And so it was more important to them to have people who were marrying similar status even if they were of different races, that seemed to be better than marrying someone who is like below your station, which again, a very
there's a lot of things that go into that.
Yeah, it's like there's a lot of problems there. Yeah, it's a whole big mess.
It says like a lot of like what they thought. I mean, again, like of the idea of like of different races, what they thought about people in different classes.
Yeah, no, again, especially if you also keep in mind that when they said the word race, what they meant was species.
Yeah,
it's even more like appalling.
Yeah.
Both that they thought that way, but then it was also like you see why it was appalling to them, the idea. Even though you can see why it would be appalling to them, you also are like, except that your premise is wrong and disgusting and hurtful that you thought that way.
And that is appalling.
And that's appalling. That's appalling to me. And so yeah, it's like a lot of problematic moving parts all together. But I think again it's really interesting to be able to understand like the dynamics that went on in that specific version of racism. And that's one thing that I think is really powerful about Kimberly J. Lau's like research is that she's looking at these like different dimensions of what was like current to that time. Because again, it's like she's pulling from research about race that's coming from contemporary sources of the time that were like the missionaries that were writing, the fur trappers that were writing, different like officials that were coming over, the travelogues that were coming out of these things. So you can see this kind of broad array of contemporary writings about that subject. So you can see like, oh, it's not just one person's idea of like, oh, I think that Prince Marcassin, I think that it might be an allegory or that she was comparing him to a person who is native to like the North American continent. She's not just like supposing that or pulling out of like thin air. It's like she's showing the contemporary thought on like the matter. And so her research, I find it's like very, very rich.
Yeah, that is super interesting.
But then also it's like, oh geez, it was more racist than I thought. So it's like
just when you thought racism was bad, you realize it's worse than you thought.
There's thicker layers of worse stuff that I didn't realize was also happening. Oh man, it is horrifying. And so, yeah, it's like understanding that these stories like have a history that went into them and that there is like politics underlying the dialogue, you know, like within this story, I don't think makes it any less enjoyable to read. For me, it's like it makes it a more informing read. I can get more out of it, even if some of what I'm getting out of it is, oof, I do not agree with that. Oh, yikes.
Right. Because it like it takes it to that next layer deeper. It takes it to the next layer deeper where you're not reading it and enjoying the racism. You are reading it and then now the racism, instead of like ruining it, where it's like, oh, this is like a racist story and I can't even read it and I don't want to read it because it's super racist.
Yeah.
But you take it to the next level and you're like, what can I learn from this?
Yeah.
Which then makes it interesting again, you know, if not like fun in the same way that we usually think of like slappy, happy, good time, fun stories, you know. But again, it's interesting now that when you know the history, when you know why it's racist and why they thought certain things, like you can see things that you didn't see before, which makes it interesting again in like a more of an academic setting or academic way. Yeah,
especially like so many of these like stories and tales, and we know we've encountered this too, the sexism in the stories where I am like, oh barf, like that makes me want to gag, like but again, it's like yes, and I'm free to feel that way and to see that sexism in that, or like the ableism in a story, or like the homophobia in a story. Like I can see that, and it's information. It tells me what went into it when it was written. And it is like, yeah, and what went into some of these salon tales was political commentary that I do not agree with, that I find distasteful, that is, you know, not enjoyable, but at least when I know that it's in there, I know that I'm not going to also like accidentally internalize any of that racism, like thinking about like, oh, this is a story about how this group of people are subhuman. So yeah, Mary Catherine Delanoise, The Wild Boar. And this story is also, I'm using the translation selected and edited by Jack Zipes.
Yeah.
Jack Zipes. In his
He
book,
did it.
The Great Fairy Tale Tradition from Straparola and Basile to the Brothers Grimm. And like I said before when I talked about this book, he only mentions the men in that title, but this book is chock full of the tales from the Solanaires, and it's good because then you get a lot of their writing. And
Mhm.
again, they're longer stories because they were writing more in like a short story
Mhm.
format than the Brothers Grimm very like quick
Yeah.
details. Once upon a time, great way to start a story.
Classic.
King and a queen, super sad because they couldn't have any children. Again, classic.
Heard that before.
So I love that in like this story because of course written by women. Though still beautiful, the queen was no longer young.
Yeah, that's funny.
That's like, hey, just want you to know, like she was still a hottie, but she not childbearing years hottie, but still a hottie. And we
Yeah.
need you to know that. It's very important. Anyway, but she was old enough that she was like, there's no possible way that I'm ever going to be able to get pregnant and like have kids. And this like really upset her a lot. And so she was kind of always finding herself in her mind when she had some like downtime, either praying to the gods that she would have a baby or wishing to the fairies if they could hear her that she could have a baby. And this one day while she was strolling around in the woods, she found some berries, which I thought that this would come back more like in the story because it seemed like such a specific detail where it was like she was gathering up violets and roses and then also some strawberries. And she started snacking on the strawberries and then fell asleep. And they mentioned those three things, and I almost think that those items themselves represent the fairies themselves, except that those details will never show back up in the story. So don't get attached to them. But it was like the second that she ate the strawberries, she fell asleep.
Yeah, so it seems like.
Yeah, like something was in those berries because she just overcome with sleepiness, lay down and fell asleep. And while she was sleeping, she had a dream. So she dreamed that there were these three fairies passing through the air over her. And one of them looked down at her and was just like, oh, here's that lovely queen that just keeps wishing and wishing that she had like a baby. It's so sad. We could really do her a service and like give her a child. And the second fairy was like, you know what? I agree. But you know what? Since you're the oldest of us fairies, why don't you begin the magic? And so the first lady was like, okay, fine. My gift to her is that she gets a son, the most handsome and amiable, the best loved prince in the world. And the second fairy was like, as for me, I want her to see this son happy in whatever he undertakes, and he will be powerful and intelligent and always just. And then they turned to the third fairy, and of course, there's always one, right? Just one that has to be an absolute horror. But the queen doesn't hear what this fairy says. Just this fairy kind of like mutters under her breath, and the other two fairies are like, oh my gosh, what's wrong with you? And then like the third fairy just like starts giggling and was like, whatever, guys, like you're always such stuck up. That's so stupid. And so they're just, having their moment. And then the queen wakes up from her dream and was like, what was that? And she's like looking around in the air and through the garden. She's not saying anything. She's like, oh, that was really upsetting. That was a really upsetting dream, which I agree with her. That is like super upsetting. So she finishes gathering up the stuff that she, the flowers and berries, I guess, or whatever. And she goes back to the castle. And the king notices that there's like a change in her, that she's, busy in thought, thinking about stuff. And so he was like, is something up with you? What's going on? And she's like, oh, nothing. It's stupid. I had like a dream. I went to sleep in the garden. I had like a dream. And he was like, oh, you could tell me your dreams. And she's like, no, it was dumb because it's just a dream, but also it was like kind of upsetting. And he was like, well, just tell me like what it is. Like, it's fine. And she's like, okay. So she told him about the first two fairies and then like the third one, like giggling and laughing. And the king was like, oh, no, this dream, like it pleases me. It has to please you too. I mean, yeah, like that last fairy makes me a little like uneasy, but that could be a positive sign that you could have a kid. And the queen was like, I'm not going to have a kid. Like I'm old. So like, that's not going to happen. Don't even worry about it. So she kind of like, I'm too old. I don't even like want to think about it. Plus it'd be really upsetting if what fully happened in my dream happens. Like, even if like the fairies were like, oh, you're going to have like a baby, it'd be really upsetting if whatever that third one was like laughing about, it sounds like I would have a baby, but something would be wrong. So that makes me more worried than anything. And she like started crying. And so the king was like, oh, it's fine. It's fine. It's fine. Everything's okay. You're like, let's forget about it. Like, not talk about it. Well, a couple months pass and it became obvious that the queen was in fact pregnant. And so she kind of was thinking the entire time about it. The whole kingdom was like praying for it to be a son. They were all really excited because, again, like she'd been old and they didn't think there was going to be like an heir to the throne. So this was like exciting. So everybody was sending prayers her way and wishing them like all the best. And the whole time the queen was just kind of beside herself, worrying about like what this all would be. And the whole court was told, like, when she went into labor, and everybody, you know, wanted to get a first look at this baby and be there like when it was born. They wanted, so it was like everybody crowded around when this happened. It says the public joy was quickly changed to sadness when instead of a handsome prince, a little wild boar was born. Everybody shrieked, which frightened the queen very much. And when she asked if she could see the baby, they kind of were like, the baby's fine. We're going to get it like all cleaned up and taken care of. And we're going to take care of you. And you need to rest because you need your rest. And they like showed this baby to the king. And the king was like, okay, just stick it in a bag and drown it in a river.
Yikes.
Because he was like, no, we just need to get this kid gone. But after he like thought about it for hopefully a quick second, he was like,
hopefully it didn't take you too much to like talk yourself into not drowning a baby.
Yeah,
your own baby.
Because it said, but afterward he had pity, and thinking it right to consult the queen first about the matter, he gave the orders for the boar to be fed. Which, like, he's like, you know what? This seems like something my wife should get a say in also. So we'll wait until she's like feeling better to like make an informed decision. Which I guess, thank you.
Yeah, not like as far as I would have liked him to go, but the right direction at least.
Because he was worried that his wife, her health being so like taxed by like being pregnant and like
right, that like the shock of that would not be good.
And so they started feeding the baby, and it says they had to provide 6 nurses for him, 3 of them dry nurses in the English fashion. And these women kept giving him Spanish wines and cordials to drink, which taught him early to be a connoisseur of the best wines. Oh, the French. Which, yeah, guys, do not feed your newborn baby the finest Spanish wines, or even the worst Spanish wines. Don't give them any wines, Spanish or otherwise.
9 out of 10 doctors would encourage you not to give your children wine, your babies.
So the queen, day by day, is getting like increasingly like stronger, but also more frustrated. Why won't people like bring her a baby? So finally she demands to like have her baby brought to her. And so they wrapped him up in blankets of beautiful gold brocade, I guess, to make it better. But it's like, yes, he's a wild boar, but also look how cute he is in his outfit. Like, oh, okay. As long as we can dress him up.
I mean, hey, that does make any little animal cute.
Gold brocade. Yeah, absolutely.
I don't even know what brocade is. Oh, ooh. Brocade, a class of richly decorative shuttle woven fabrics. Often made in colored silks and sometimes with gold and silver threads. This is super pretty. I like this a lot.
Yeah, a textile that was originally made in areas such as China and Southeast Asia.
Nice.
So these long-term trading partners that they have. So anyway, obviously the queen is at first really shocked and upset when she sees the baby. But she also, even though she wouldn't say it to her friends, she could not help but love him. She held him often in her arms, and at the bottom of her heart, she thought him pretty, though she dare not utter this for fear people might think she were crazy. But anyway, so at first when she sees the baby and she's just like totally shocked by the look of him, the king was like, honey, don't worry about it. I place no blame on you. Which, yeah, of course not. What in the, like... What a thing to say. Like, don't worry, sweetie. I'm not mad at you for how ugly the baby is. Like, thanks, buddy. He was like, obviously this is a trick played by that wicked fairy. We can easily solve this problem by drowning this kid. And she was like, excuse me? Like, I love it. She's like, don't make me your accomplice in such a cruel deed. I feel the tenderness within me making an appeal for him. Do not harm him, I beg you. He has already suffered too much by being born a wild boar when he should have been a man. So she was very much like, no, he is mine. Like, this is my little baby. I'm going to take care of him. How dare you? And the king is basically like a turd the rest of the book. He wants nothing to do with this kid, which people might recall Hans my Hedgehog from A Grimm's Fairy Tale. If people go and listen, I can't remember the number of the episode for Hans my Hedgehog, but we did it in response to The Witcher coming out and talking about the law of surprise. And Hans my Hedgehog,
episode 66.
Oh, thank you, Jeffrey. In episode 66, Hans my Hedgehog, you might recall that father also wanted nothing to do with his magically born half animal, half human baby, which is like a tail type that is like based off of this like tail type. Hans my Hedgehog, not born royal though, not like the Pig Kings stories. But anyway, so she did all that she could to get him teachers who could teach him how to be human. It's the Frenchification process. So they had taught him to give his little foot when he was a little baby, to give his little foot to those who came to salute him as others might offer the hand to be kissed. They had decked him out with diamond bracelets, and in all his ways there was a certain grace. So one evening while the queen was out walking, she was carrying her little baby prince in her arms, and she passed under the same tree that she had had the dream underneath. And so she suddenly called out, in case anyone was listening, "Here then is the prince so handsome, so perfect, and so happy that I was supposed to have. Oh, deceptive dream. Oh, fairies, what did I do for you to mock me so?" And all of a sudden, out of one of the oak trees sprang out a richly dressed lady who said, "Great queen, do not grieve at having given birth to the wild little boar. I assure you that there will come a time when he will seem lovely to you."
Sounds like he already does, kind of.
Yeah, seem lovely to her. Yeah, that's like, she like still likes him. And the queen says, "It's difficult for me to believe you, madam. No matter how much intelligence my son may possess, who would love him with such a face like this?" So it's like her immediate worry was not, I guess, that she didn't love him or find him beautiful, because she did love him. She had tender feelings for him. She wanted the best for him, but she also is like thinking forward to like, if this is supposed to be the heir to the kingdom,
like how is this heir going to then have an heir?
Like how is this going to work out? He's not going to have the life that I would have wanted for him, because how is he going to be able to get married?
Is there some degree of, not love as in like finding a partner, but love as in like, he's going to be leading the people, and the people are not going to be able to grow to love a ruler that looks like a boar? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yes, I do. I absolutely do. That it's like there's more that exists for his life and being loved than just romantic love. There's like being loved by the people for being like a good, just ruler, for being a person who is like intelligent at leading them and caring for that, like all this like other stuff. There is that like that exists, but not in the world of this story.
No.
And also, I do want to tell you, Geoff, and the people listening to this story, that this king in this story, or like the prince, Prince Marcassin, he's an incel. Like, he irritates me the entire story. I understand that he's like this prince or whatever, but his personality is just absolutely atrocious. And that's true in every single one of like the like King Pig stories that like I read. I've never found. I felt like Mary Catherine.
Like, I should feel bad for you, but I
don't. And I feel like Delanois has done the best of taking like the source material and trying to make him like as sympathetic as possible, but it still is very hard to keep those beats that are in like the story that make it like the story and have him be a sympathetic character.
Right. Yeah, it's like the choices in that. I mean, I'm presuming, because I don't know this story, I'm in the middle of it right now, but presuming that he's going to make some choices that are indicative of his personality and like his character, and those are the things that make it like, bro, no.
Yeah. Which it is also interesting for me to think about Delanois and how she was forced into a marriage that she did not want when she was very young. And like her experience of marriage was horrible. And so it's like in ways I can see her both in the character of like the queen loving her baby and wanting like the best for it. But then also I can see her in some of like the women who are being forced into like marriages that like, yeah, we'll get there. I'm so sorry. I'm like jumping again. But yeah, the fairy was basically just again like, do not grieve, great queen, at having given birth to the wild boar. I assure you, there will come a time when he will seem lovely to you. And then she disappeared into the tree. And then the tree disappeared into the earth. Which I'm like, whoa, you even sucked that oak tree down with you. Dang, girl.
That's a cool image, though.
Yeah. Her disappearing into the tree, and then the tree's like, also me. And then a sinkhole opened up. No, it's just too many things. Anyway, so the queen was like astonished, but she hoped that the fairy, wasn't lying to her and that something positive would eventually come out of this. And she told the king, but even he was like, yeah, I'm sick of the mockery of these fairies. Like, I don't even want to think about them anymore, which, yeah, that's fair enough. So, meanwhile, Wild Boar, he began to speak like other children. And there's like just a lot of paragraphs talking about like the clothes that he was wearing and like the things that he was taught to do, all of this stuff, how he was kind of like being taught to be as like clean and polite as possible. And all of that, again, very much that Frenchification of him where it's like, okay, he might still be physically this wild boar, but if we make him French enough, maybe he'll, not be so reviled. So anyway, he's grown up and he's like old enough now that he's starting to think about like his future and like what he wants for his future. And this one day he's with his mother and a lady entered, and this was a widow who had 3 beautiful daughters, and they had fallen on hard times because like her husband had died and left them nearly penniless. And so they had been reduced in status, like their royal status. But this one woman had remembered how kind the queen has been to her like all throughout the years and was hoping that the queen might offer them some kind of like help and pity. And the queen was like, absolutely, I can shelter you at the court. It would be no problem. We'd love to have you here. And her 3 daughters were named Ismini,
and Ismoni.
Meeny, miny, mo. So her daughters were called Ismini. The second was Zelonide. Guys, we all know that I'm Zelonide. Probably. And the youngest was Marthanese. Marthesie. It is the name of an Amazon from Greek antiquity.
Oh, interesting. I couldn't keep all those letters in my head to now try to pronounce it with the knowledge that it is Greek. Marthenines. That sounds weird.
Marthenines. It looks like Martha.
We just call her M.
We'll call her M.
Martha. Yeah.
Martha.
We call her Martha.
Marthanese.
For short.
Marthanese. Anyway, so the queen promised that she would take care of this woman and her 3 daughters and that she doesn't need to be worried. They'll find her a place in the palace and she'll be treated really well. Well, of course, we can all see that Prince Marcassin sees these like 3 beautiful women and is like, beautiful women. Oh, they're really lovely. I would like to marry a lovely woman someday. I would like to marry Ismini. But he also was like, well, I don't know. I'm kind of shy. Like, I'll work my way up, my courage up to talk to this girl. But Ismini very quickly in court got the attention of a young knight named Corydon. And he was also very famous in court for, one, being so handsome, but also being very chivalrous, true to his word, like just this really great guy. And Corydon was a little more obvious in his affection for Ismini, and Ismini felt the same way. And so the queen, she could see that like these 2 really, really liked each other. And she had told the widow that she would help her with her girls in court and help, with their status. And so the queen was like, you know what? You guys, I can just tell you guys were born for one another. You're like meant to be together. So I want you guys to give your hearts to each other and let's plan a wedding. But Prince Marcassin, he was like, oh no, she's going to get married and like never know that I liked her and wanted to be with her. And this poor guy, it is like really sad, this like image of him like looking at himself in a mirror and just like screaming at himself, calling himself names. I'm like, that's kind of a bummer. When he's just like, with a face as hideous as yours, could you possibly dare to hope that the fair Ismene could think favorably of you? And it's like, oh, that's really, really sad. But his behavior is not great later, so I have no great pity for him. So
this is the last time we feel bad for him.
Yeah, I'm like, what?
Because look, this moment, up until this moment, like fair and relatable.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And the important thing is that your choices and actions from this point forward, you know what I mean, matter. Yeah. How you react and respond to these thoughts and this situation.
Yeah.
And, you know, you've spoiled it. He's not going to respond well, but
he's not.
But this is the moment. If you find yourself, kids, you young men and women, choose carefully what you do next.
Don't hop onto the manosphere and become like a radicalized incel.
Yeah. Don't be a boar king.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, so he was like absolutely beside himself when he found out that Ismene was committing her heart to Corydon. So he one day saw her sitting under some trees, singing the words of a song that her lover had made for her. Just imagining like Corydon with like a guitar, like playing her a song. Anyway, so she's just sitting by the trees, like singing songs to herself, and the prince goes up to her and he's really emotional. And he asked her like if it was true that she was like planning on marrying Corydon. And she was like, oh, yep, the queen's actually commanded me that I like start, you know, receiving his attentions and moving a relationship in that direction. And so that's with the queen's blessing, of course, that's, you know, what I'm going to do. And he was like, Ismene, you're so young. I didn't know that you were planning on getting married so soon or so quickly, or I would have told you that if I had known that you were interested in like getting married, I would have proposed that you marry the only son of a great king who already loves you and who would be overjoyed to make you his wife.
And she's like, oh, the King of England's son?
And Ismene, she grew really pale because like she had noticed that he was like, had been weird around her.
Yeah.
You know, kind of like quiet and shy, but always wanting to be in her presence. So she kind of knew what he was like getting at, but she wanted to help him like save face basically by like not immediately just being like, ew, gross. And okay, one thing it also said, along with the like, he was always like really shy around her, but like wanting to be like near her. It also said he had given her all the truffles, which his wild boar instincts enabled him to find in the forest.
Hey, he's got skills. He's got some skills.
Yeah. Like, let him cook.
Girls only like guys that have great skills.
Yeah. Computer hacking skills.
Nunchucking skills.
Truffle
hunting skills. Oh my gosh. Did we just say it at the same time?
Did.
Amazing. We're friends.
Yeah, probably. But anyway, so she was trying to like gently let him down. And so she was just like, well, I'm very glad, my lord, not to have known about the sentiments of the son of this great king. It may be that my family, more ambitious than myself, she means her mom, would have wished to force me to marry him. But I must confess in confidence that my heart belongs entirely to Corydon. So it can't be changed. She's like, I'm not just marrying Corydon because like your mom wanted me to. I'm marrying him because like I love him. So I'm so glad that I didn't know about this other unknown prince person that you're talking about, because like my mom would have made me take advantage of that offer, and wouldn't that be bad? And immediately Prince Marcassin is like, what? You would refuse a member of the royal crown who would place his fortune at your disposal?
Ugh.
Yeah. She said, oh no, it's just like I have more tenderness than I have ambition in my heart. And I beg you, my lord, seeing that you have dealings with this prince, to make him promise to leave me alone. So she's like trying not to make him feel bad. She's being very delicate about it, and he is not having any of it. And so he just starts shouting at her. He's like, you wicked creature, you know only too well the prince I mean. You don't like the way I look, and so you don't want to marry me because you don't want to be Queen Wild Boar. You don't want to be Queen Marcassin. You have sworn eternal faithfulness to this knight, but think of the difference between us. I love this. He's like, I'm not Adonis, I admit, but I am a formidable wild boar. Supreme force is surely worth as much as some mere natural graces. So while he is now screaming at her, his eyes look like fire and his tusks. Oh, because he had these like wild boar tusks. I don't know if we talked about them earlier, but they start protruding out of his face and they're just like clacking against each other. And this girl is like terrified and he just like storms off.
Kids, that's not how to respond to getting rejected.
No.
Don't be like, but I'm rich and you're terrible because you won't marry me because I'm rich, even though I'm ugly. Not how you respond to that situation.
It's not the way. So now Ismene is just like crying in the garden and Corydon like shows up and he's like, whoa, like what's going on? Why are you so upset? So she tells him everything that is happening. And he was like, I refuse to pursue my happiness at the cost of yours. If a crown is offered to you, you have to accept it. And she's like, what? Are you kidding me? Like, no, I'm not going to just like accept some crown and forget about you to be with like a monster. No, like I'm in love with you. I want you. Doesn't matter like the riches.
Wait up. Her fiance is like, it's like, you have to take this opportunity.
Yeah. Like he's like, like he's like, I won't hold it against you if you.
But he's not encouraging her to, or is he?
Yeah. I mean, like, I feel like he kind of like he's in an uncomfortable spot too, because it's like his prince, like the prince of his kingdom, the royalty of his kingdom is saying like, I want that woman. Back off. And he's thinking, the logical thing to do, even if it breaks my heart, but I still like, he knows that he can't refuse. And by encouraging her to refuse, he's only going to get her killed. Like he's only going to ruin their lives. And so he's like,
he loves her enough to let her go.
So, there's a lot of everybody's in their feelings, feeling their feelings. And while they're engaged in that dispute, like immediately the wild boar is like, I'm going to tell mama, and like goes to his mother to tell her of his desire to marry Ismene and to get his mom on his side to like make this happen. And his mom was like, have you thought about what you're saying? Who would want you? Which rough. And she's like, what kind of children could you hope for? And he's like, Ismene is so beautiful that she couldn't have ugly children. As opposed to his mom. Yee, rough. And even if they were to take after me, I'm determined to do anything than to see her in someone else's arms. And the queen is like, honey, she's in such like a low position. You're a prince. Like you don't have to marry somebody that's like in a low position. So she's basically living in our court as a charity from us. She's not in a position where like, where it'd even be like a favorable match that would make sense. Like anyway, like, yes, she's beautiful, but also it's not a match that would make sense for a prince. And he's like, it doesn't matter because it just matters of like, who's willing to marry me. And it's like, she's not willing to marry you. Like, dude, that.
Didn't you hear what she was saying?
Yeah, like that's like beside the point, like what you're talking about. And the queen was like, which this line I think is like very much a social commentary by Delanoy, where the queen says, what you need to find is a princess. Princesses are less free than anyone else to choose who they marry. Like that's who we like need to get you like betrothed to, because what we can just like do is describe you fairer than love itself, like in a letter. And when the marriage contract is complete and we have the lady in our keeping, there's no backing out. Like then she'll be trapped. And like that's the smart plan to do for us. Not Ismene. Like that's not the way to go. And he completely in the most unaware way, he's like, I'm not capable of such trickery. I would despair at making my wife unhappy. I'm like, really? I literally wrote in the margins of this, really? I don't think that bears out.
Yeah, you're like trying to force someone who doesn't want to marry you.
Yeah.
Like, but I don't want to make them unhappy. I'm surprised he was able to react that way when his mom is sitting him down and being like, hey, listen, it's not the play to like try to marry someone you know and like. It's the play to trick someone into being forced to be stuck with you because that's how ugly you are. Like your own mother. Yeah. Like telling you being like the only way we can get you married is by trickery and coercion and legal trickery.
Yeah, not this way, not what you want to do. But the queen like pushes back and she's like, the young lady that you desire, do you think she'd be happy with you? The man she loves is worthy of her love. And if there's a difference of rank between a sovereign and a subject, there's no less between a wild boar and the most charming man of the world. Which I'm like, Mom.
You're not helping. You're not wrong, but you're not helping.
Like, someone's going to need some therapy after this. Like, I'm telling you what.
I feel like I need therapy just by listening to this. I'm just kidding.
So like, I'm like, the conversation went on. It's like really interesting to read, especially keeping in mind, like Delanois, like at one point, the queen says, I only want to show you that if you marry a woman who does not love you, you will be very unhappy and you will bring her sorrow. If you could but understand how much people suffer from forced marriages, you would not want to risk one. Isn't it better to live by yourself in peace? Which I'm like, that right there, I feel like is like Delanois life, where she's just like, you know what? It is much better to be alone and living a life of peace than with somebody that you're miserable to be with or is miserable to be with you.
Yeah. Because like them being miserable to be with you would make you miserable to be with them too.
Yeah. So it's like, don't do that to yourself.
Yeah, that is very wise. Yeah. Very smart. Good advice.
Yeah. But he does not take any of it.
Of course not. Because he's a spoiled rich prince.
So after a long back and forth that I won't, retell all of it. If you want to read the story, you absolutely can to get all of the like good words. But, they have this like back and forth. And basically he's like, no, I want to marry Ismini. You like get permission from father and then go get permission from her mom. And so the queen goes on these errands where she like goes and tells the king, hey, so your son wants to marry this woman. And he's like, what? That's stupid. Fine, I'll sign off on it. But like, please don't involve me with any of this. And so then the queen goes to Ismini's mother and asks for permission. And of course, she's like, my daughter marrying the crown prince? Absolutely. Yes, 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 yes. Do it, please. Yes, that is what I want.
Ugh.
So after the mom agrees, they basically inform Ismini that this is going to happen. And then they tell Corydon that he's like not supposed to be in the castle, seen in the castle like ever again. That they're like, get lost, loser, because the wild boar is like so jealous that, if he sees you, he'll want you dead. And so Ismini says to him, she's like, what do you mean, cruel prince? Do you think you can banish Corydon from my heart as you do now from my presence? No, he is planted there too well. Don't you realize that when you cause me grief, you will be causing your own as well? Here's the man who I can love. For you, I feel only horror. The wild boar, the prince, he's like, and as for me, you cruel creature, I am completely in love with you. Which, stop calling her names then, I think. It is useless to confess all your hate for me. You will still be my wife, and you'll only suffer more. Which, oh my gosh, like this man, I'm so sorry. I hate him. I hate this prince. I'm not rooting for him.
No,
like, at all.
Of course. Understandable. Same. This is a cautionary tale.
Yeah. And so here's an important line for later about the king and why the king didn't want to have anything to do with it. It says, this marriage seemed distasteful and ridiculous to him. Indeed, he was afraid that the race of wild boars would be perpetuated in the royal house, and he was upset by the blind indulgence which the queen displayed for her son. So that idea of like the race of wild boars, like again, like this like species. Somehow there is this taint in the blood now of the royal line, and it'll produce this race, this group of like subhumans that he sees is his son. And that like he's like, there's no amount of like Frenchification that can fix the fact that this guy is not a human. Anyway, so because the king was so horrified by the idea of this like relationship, the prince was worried that it would get called off if it didn't happen immediately. And so he was like, let's start preparing for the wedding ceremony like as quickly as possible. So had all of these different clothes made for the festivities, all the food was ordered, everything was getting prepared. I feel so bad for him because it's like on his wedding day, it's like it says he had knee breeches made for himself with bunches of ribbons at the knees and a perfumed doublet, for there was always a slight odor about him which was difficult to endure. So like maybe it's like, oh, his presence was always difficult to be in. His mantle was embroidered with jewels, his wig was as fair as a child's curls, and his hat was covered with feathers. No one had ever seen such an extraordinary figure, and no one except Ismene, who was unfortunately condemned to marry him, could look at him without laughing. Which, I'm like, that's so sad. Again, I don't have a whole lot of pity for this guy, but also it's like so sad that he's like trying to do everything right and still appearing completely ridiculous to everybody around him, that they're like, wow, like you think if you put enough ribbons on a pig, it'll stop being a pig. So anyway, I'm like, I don't feel bad for this guy, but I, do feel bad for him that people are just looking at him thinking he's ridiculous. Anyway, I do really enjoy the writing of Delanois. Like when she's writing about this like wedding and it says like, Corydon saw her passing on her way to the temple looking like a beautiful victim about to be slaughtered. The wild boar was overjoyed and implored her to banish the deep sadness that had overcome her, for he wished to make her so happy that all the queens of the earth would envy her. And he says, I confess that I am not handsome, but it is said that every man is like some animal. Well, I am most like a wild boar. And I'm like,
you don't
say. Well, because I guess like what he was trying to get at was like, oh, at least like my animal nature is on the outside instead of on the inside. Yeah. But I contend that no, he is boorish on the outside
in his behavior. Yeah. It is interesting though. Like, I mean, that is an interesting commentary that is being made by the author of like, it's like all men have some animal in them. And yeah, like you're saying, he's like, mine, you know what you get because you can see it. But like these other men, they're animals on the inside too, but you don't know what kind.
Yeah.
Which is a sad commentary.
Yeah, absolutely. So anyway, I do want to say also Ismene, the mother, like she is horrible and she gets like a lot of screen time like in this story. She gets a lot of airtime in this story to highlight how horrible she is. I don't know if I'm going to like totally go in on like her character development like in this story, but she is prodding at her daughter on her wedding day being like, wretched girl, do you wish to destroy us along with yourself? Don't you fear that the prince's love may turn to fury? Like she's like, quit looking so unhappy and like just be grateful and do this for our family, like so that we can get the advantages of it. So ceremony happens. They are married. They go on to the feastings and it's wonderful. And the prince is happy. The kingdom's having a good time. It's a party, free food, whatever. Ismene is absolutely beside herself with sorrow. She's so upset. And even when they're dancing their first dance, like everybody can see that it's like they are miserable being together. And so even it's like the feeling in the crowd is like changing as people are kind of like, ugh, like thinking the closer and closer it gets to like the wedding night, the more kind of everybody is like, oh no, this is grody. So when they are ready to retire for the evening, everybody came because there's a certain amount of like ceremony that goes into like the wedding and like the wedding night and like the ceremony of disrobing. And after the ceremony of disrobing, that's finally when her and the prince are left alone. So immediately Ismene is like, well, before we go to bed, I have some letters that I need to write in the adjoining room. And Prince Marcassin is kind of like, oh, it's kind of a weird time to be keeping up correspondences, but like, that's totally fine. I understand. I'll be in here when you get back. And she's like, okay, cool. No problem. So she goes into the side private room and she is shocked to find Corydon inside of the room because she was just planning to go in there to bide her time and kill herself probably. But she sees him there and she says that he was able to bribe one of her like ladies in waiting to like open the door for her so that he could see her one more time. And she could see that he was holding a dagger in her hands. He was like, don't think, my charming princess, that I've come to reproach you for abandoning me. When our tender love was in its initial stages, you said your heart would never change. Nevertheless, you have consented to leave me, and I blame the gods more than I do you. But neither you nor the gods can make me bear such a great sorrow. Losing you, princess, there is nothing left for me to do but to die. And he plunged his dagger into his heart and died there.
Jeez. I thought he brought the dagger for the other guy.
Yeah, no.
Thought this was going to be a murder.
But no, it's a double suicide because immediately Ismene picks up the dagger, like takes the dagger like out of his chest and plunges it into her chest and lays down on him and dies. So Prince Marcassin, he's like sitting and like waiting for a while and being like, wow, it's really taken her a long time to write that letter. So
dramatic irony.
Yep. So he gets up and he goes and he opens the door and he finds that these two are lying dead together. And like immediately he's just like wailing beside himself with like grief and rage. And he also was like filled with rage, a maddening hate, because he adored Ismene, but he knew that she had only killed herself in order to put a sudden end to the union they had just contracted. So he was like, oh man, like I love her, but how could she do this to me? And it's like, never once is he thinking like, I did this to her. Like, I drove her to this by like forcing myself on this woman. And so of course the whole castle is woken up. It's really upset. The princess that that just gotten married is now like found dead. And it said the king did not rise. He could not bring himself to feel sorry for the wild boar and left it to the queen to console him. Because he was like, nope, I'm not messing with that. This is like all nonsense.
I thought we should have drowned this guy from the beginning. I mean, and I've been hands off ever since. Father of the year right there. Gosh.
For real. Wow. Bare minimum. Like the parenting he is doing. So the queen, of course, like the queen is like horrified and upset that all this is happening. She wanted her son to be happy. She had been promised this son that would bring her like happiness, and this is happening. She feels bad for him. She's comforting him. She feels bad for this young girl that did not need to like have all this happen. And she knew that she had like a partner. So the queen is having all these like complex feelings about all of this that's like going on. Meanwhile, the girl's mother is like, oh no, what an embarrassment for our family. Like, what is this going to mean like for our family? Because she's awful.
Mm-hmm.
But the queen, in like some of her laments, she said, what harm did I do to these fairies to make me suffer so bitterly? I was hoping for an amiable and charming son. They made him like a wild boar. He is indeed a monster. And I'm kind of like, they didn't make him a monster. His actions are making him a monster. Like the way that he's behaving and treating other people is what makes him a monster. So the wild boar ended up writing a poem to put on the headstone of his deceased wife of one day that I will not read to you because I'm like, oh, men being like, oh, and also here's like a really sad melancholy poem about how much like this woman was loved by me and how tragic it is that she's dead. And it's like, okay, you don't need to acknowledge any of like your fault in any of this. Sure. Anyway, so a few years pass by of them in mourning and the wife thinking that his mother, the queen, thinking that he's kind of like gotten over this idea of wanting to get married. But like he was doing more to like go out and do things to take his mind off of himself and his ugliness and stuff. And also trying to like create more friendships with like the other people in the court. So just kind of going back to being like a young adult prince in the court of the king, full of people who are always telling him what he wants to hear because of him being a royalty and not out of any real thing, but just enjoying that. And there's like a bunch of commentary between his mom on that and him on that subject of like her being like, you need to stop listening to only the opinions of people who have a vested interest in you liking them, because they're only going to lie to you. And him being like, isn't it better to have people who are willing to lie to me to make me feel good than to be surrounded by people who treat me badly? And she's like, there's a mix. Like where it's like, oh geez, like there's a halfway point. Like, yeah. So there's a lot of commentary on that. But the second sister, Zilonide, she kind of was seeing him as a brother-in-law. As like, oh, you married my sister and she died like really tragically, but we can have like, we're both in the court together. But he, of course, was getting a crush on her because she looked as she got older, she looked more and more like her sister that he had married and had killed herself. And so he finally was like, you know what? I think I wish to marry Zolanide. Like, I think like I want to move on and marry this girl. Like, that's what I want. Let me go to my mom and ask her about it. And the queen was like, stop. Don't. She doesn't want to marry you. That is not the like move that we're doing. And he's like, well, ask the king and then ask her mom. And the king was like, don't even talk to me. Do not even talk to me about this. You know exactly what I think about this. It ended in disaster last time. I don't even want to think about it. Queen, whatever happens from this point on, like that's on you, because like I'm telling you right now, I want nothing to do with it. So the queen goes to Zolanide's mom and is like, hey, so sorry about your daughter dying last time. Can daughter number 2, is that cool? Can we like do that? Would that like totally be fine? And of course this woman is like, yes, of course you can have like my daughter. Nothing would make me happier than you forgiving us for that last thing, which is like, forgive you. Okay, whatever. Like, yipes. But yeah, like absolutely, I would be happy. Take the daughter. Take the second daughter. Like that would be absolutely great. So again, he like goes to this girl to talk with her. So he goes into Zolanide's little like apartment in like, of the court. It says he enters her room unceremoniously, which rude. He's very much like, I can be anywhere I want. It's totally fine. I can have whatever I want because I'm the prince. So he kisses her hand and he says, little sister, I bring you news which I do not think will be displeasing to you. I should like you to marry. Which, okay, please don't start a marriage proposal by saying little sister.
Yeah.
First off. But also, like, she is his sister-in-law.
Yeah.
But also gross. But anyway, so he's like, I bring news which I do not think will be displeasing to you. I should like you to marry. And she's like, oh, if I marry according to your wishes, I know I would be happy. Like, who do you want me to marry? And he's like, the bridegroom in question is one of the greatest princes in the kingdom, but he's not handsome. And she's like, well, that's not important to me. My mother's so hard on me that I should only be too glad to change my situation because my mom is the worst. And the prince is like, he of whom I speak is very much like me. And Zolanide was like, who's he talking about? Who could he possibly be? She's not picking up what he's putting down at first. She's just like, wait, who's he talking about? Who is in this court that's not very handsome, that's like him, but is like the son of a king? And he's like, you're not answering me, little sister. Is it out of joy or grief that you are silent? And she's like, no, I don't recall, my lord, ever having seen anyone at court like you. And he was like, you can't guess that I'm talking about myself? And she's like, no, I'm dumb.
And he's like, perfect. That's what I'm looking for.
No, she's like, wait, what are you talking about? Like, you married my sister. Like, what do you mean? Like, what is this like about? And then he was like, oh my gosh, do you not hear what I'm saying to you, you ungrateful creature? Which I'm like, okay, bro, stop yelling vile insults at women the second that you're not hearing what you like. You incel.
Yeah.
Calm down. You're being confusing. And then being like, don't you understand what I'm trying to say to you, you dumb idiot? Like, I don't know. You started the proposal by calling me little sister. So no, I wasn't picking up what you were putting down. And now you're literally calling me names. And he basically was like, you had no hope of ever being a queen in your life. The type of person that you are with the rank that you have, your pathetic little life, you have no hope of like ever being a queen. But I'm being gracious enough to cast a good eye on you and offering this chance to you. You should be seeking to deserve my love. And I hope that you're not having any foolish ideas like your sister, which I'm like, are you bringing up my sister's death seriously while you're trying to propose? Because like, this is the worst. And she was like, oh no, you can have no fear that I'm going to take my life the way that my sister did. Bet. Which threat. Is what he should have heard that as. But I mean, she also is trying to be like, aren't there more amiable people out there? Like, can't you look for somebody who would want this proposal, who would be happy like to have this proposal? Why are you doing this? And he's just getting like more and more upset and angry and, same type of situation. So it's like as much back and forth like as you want, like same outcome is like the wedding day is happening. And as people are starting to like get ready for the wedding day because like it's all being like arranged, he is sending gifts. Prince Marcassin is like sending all these gifts to Zolanide, like trying to be like, oh, look at all the like the beautiful stuff that I can give you, that I can like offer you. And this one package shows up, and within like the package with like all this other stuff, all these other dresses, is this like long dagger that's like encrusted with like diamonds and jewels. And one of the attendants was like, is that the dagger that your sister used to kill herself? Which that's a
Jeez.
really insensitive thing to gift to somebody,
Yeah.
I would say.
Definitely.
Yeah, whether on purpose or not, like, why would he be like, oh, and also I'm going to gift you this dagger because it's really beautiful? Anyway, she was like, you know what? I'm going to keep hold of this. I'm going to hang on to this. So she stashes that little dagger in her clothes, which the author notes was common at the time for women to carry little daggers with them, which, if true, love that. Perfect. Absolutely perfect. So the marriage day is happening. It is unfolding. And there is something that goes on in this wedding where I'm like, I don't fully understand what is like going on, because it basically was like, it was almost like a masquerade where they're like, oh, we're going to have some people, some of her attendants dress up as like fortune tellers in a disguise. It said one of these ladies was the confidant of Zolanide, and the wild boar knew this. It was out of curiosity that he had planned the disguise. Oh, so I guess that answered my question. He planned this weird charade. So after they had danced a very short entrée du ballet, it had to be short because it exhausted the prince. I guess he was not very delicate on his pig feet. He went up to his new bride and made certain signs pointing to one of the masked astrologers, which made Zolanide think it was her friend who was by her side and that she was pointing to the wild boar. And so she was like, oh, yeah, he's like so awful, isn't he? Just like horrible and like terrible. But don't worry, I have a plan. So then she, thinking that she's talking to her friend who's like a confidant, passes this person the dagger. But of course, we know that it's like Prince. And she's like, tonight, after we go into our room and you can hear my husband snoring, come into the room and we'll kill him together. The pig prince is like, ooh,
Can't wait.
Prince Marcassin is like, ooh, okay, yeah, for sure. So it said he tried not to talk because his voice was somewhat extraordinarily easy to identify for some reason. And
It's all the snorting
like the clanking tusks
of his tusks.
Yeah. So yeah, he took the dagger quietly and then left her and then got out of the disguise. The masquerade part of the evening was over. So he was thinking to himself, is it possible that anyone so young and beautiful would be so wicked? What have I done to her that she would want to kill me? I have some faults, but who doesn't? Though I have the face of a beast, I'm still a man. Indeed, there are many beasts with human faces. Isn't Zolanide, whom I thought was so charming, a tigress, a lioness? It is so difficult to trust in appearances. Which I'm like, buddy, what in the world? Like, completely, like, no self-awareness at all. Like, he's extremely self-aware of what he looks like. Absolutely no self-awareness of how he is and, like, acts, like, to other people.
He, too, is blinded by his looks.
Yeah.
Focuses way too much on them to realize, buddy, maybe it's not just your looks that people don't like.
Yeah. Like, hey, that's actually not the worst part of you.
Which, I mean, your incel comment is like absolutely on. Yeah. As far as it's the same thing, it's like focus so much. I mean, this whole thing of like looks maxing and blah, 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 blah. Like they focus so much on the outward appearance of it all that they like do stuff like, well, you know, we'll have like extreme surgeries and whatever things, but then do very little to work on like the inside of themselves, which is what is really the most unattractive thing.
Yeah.
And it's like, and actually by going down into that lifestyle, it's like they just make that worse because they turn him into like exactly like this guy, just like angry, resentful swine.
Yeah.
It's so crazy. It's like, wow, this is a story that it's just sad that it can be so relatable to, you know, situations that we are aware of today as well.
Yeah. That it's like, oh, wow, like these attitudes of like entitlement to women, like entitlement as there's several times in the story where like he says like, oh, even if this woman is unhappy, at least I will possess a beautiful woman. At least I will possess gorgeous wife. And it's like, yeah, no, bro, your problem is this like obsession with possessing another person.
Yeah.
Like, and also being like, oh, I'm so fixated on the way that they look that that's the most important thing to me. It doesn't matter to me that they care about me, that they're kind to me, that they like appreciate none of that. I just want to possess a hot woman.
Mm-hmm.
I hate that journey for him. So yeah, whenever he's just like, oh man, some people they look beautiful on the outside, but they're beasts on the inside. Like, okay, except that you're driving this person to these actions through like this complete imbalance of power through your like forced marriage. Like you are doing violence to this person by marrying them in this way. The way that you speak to this person, the way you treat this person, it's violence and it's abuse. Like before you even like laid a hand on them. And so then to be like shocked that like, why would she want to do this to me? Why would she want to kill me? This is like so upsetting. So anyway, they go up to their marriage bed and Zolanite is like, oh, Jan, I'm really tired. And she has with her this silk cord that she's hidden like underneath her pillow, like on the bed. And so she's like, oh, I'm so tired. And she like lays down and like pretends to fall asleep. And so, of course, Wild Boar, knowing that like she's like got this plan to kill him, he lays down next to her and he starts after a couple minutes like loudly snoring. So then she waits for a little bit because she's waiting for her friend to like come through with the knife, but they're not showing up. So she like kind of quietly like creeps out of bed and is like looking behind the curtains to see if that friend has like shown up, and they haven't shown up. So she's like, well, I guess I'm gonna have to do this to myself, which I'm like, to strangle someone with like a silk cord that's so much bigger than her, it's impossible. Like he would be able to tear her like off of him. Even if he was legitimately asleep and like taken like by surprise, I don't think that she would have been able to actually do it because he's so much bigger and stronger than her. I think she would have needed that second person to be stabbing while she was choking. You know what I mean?
I don't know. I think she could, but also I'm disturbed by how deeply you're thinking into the planning of this murder.
I feel like I've watched so much like true crime, and like one thing that I keep hearing is that like it's a lot harder to like kill somebody than people think from like movies.
Yeah. No, I agree.
Especially like strangling. So I'm just like, I feel like.
But it's like with a cord, if she gets it around his neck and then just is hanging on there with her body weight, you know what I mean? And it's like on his back. That's a hard place. No matter how big and strong you are, it's hard to get around there to like reach, you know? All the while he's losing air and oxygen to his muscles to be able to like fight back.
And I was thinking too, if there's like the pillars, like if they have a bed that has like the pillars holding up like curtains, you know, like that also could be useful for like leverage. Maybe I did think a lot about this, Geoff.
Yeah, you kind of did. But
yeah, no, unfortunately, she had already given away the plot to her husband. And so when she went back in, the second that the silk cord like touched his neck, he grabbed it and then rammed his tusks through her throat.
Oh my gosh. Holy crap.
I'm like, that's
not what I saw coming.
No. And what's funny is like, that is usually the way that all of the brides get killed by like the pig prince or like the pig king, is he usually is the one that like murders them. And so actually the way that like this is written, Delanois is like giving him some like these women are still dying. Yeah. But they're like, he is getting some kind of
like it was self-defense. Yeah. Like it's not even like he heard the plan that they were going to murder him. He didn't like preemptively murder her first even.
Yeah.
He gave her the opportunity to
not murder.
And I am not defending him in this moment, but the kind of argument that seems like that she was trying to set up was like, he gave her the chance to like not go through with it.
Yeah.
Because he also kind of had a legitimate reason to think that maybe the plot was foiled because like, the friend's not going to show up and murder me with this knife because I've got it. She thinks that I was the friend. She never communicated this thing. But then, you know, she actually does something to show that she's going to do it herself. And then he's like, okay, you know, I definitely believe in like the minimum necessary force, you know, even if someone is attempting to murder you. Okay, well, never mind. I don't know. Maybe fight for your life in real life, but like ramming your tusks through her throat.
Too much.
A little extreme.
Yeah. it's too much. You're doing too much. Because that's what I'm like, she didn't need to die. Like, he didn't need to. He could have grabbed that cord from her and been like, girl, you have got to be out of your mind. Like, because like she
off to the dungeon with you.
Yeah. But that's not what happened in this story.
Nope, he tusked her to death.
Yep. And so immediately again, servants ran to fetch the queen. Oh no, there's a murder on the wedding night again. And like you're right. Double suicide. You're right, not murder. So again, the whole castle like in an uproar. Queen upset, king like, yeah, I told you so.
Castle definitely haunted.
Yep. Everything, just going nuts. And so
going hog wild.
Oh my God.
No, it's not hog wild. That's not the right context for hog wild. Hog wild kind of implies a bit of a good time, honestly.
Yeah, this is the opposite of that.
No, yeah.
It's wild boar wild. Wait, no, didn't work.
Boring. Not boring either, honestly. Anyway, sorry. There's a commotion in the castle.
So pretty much immediately, Prince Marcassin says, "Unhappy wretch that I am. I have never tasted happiness in the whole course of my life. Yeah, boo-hoo. Woe is you." I'm sorry. I'm not. I'm unhappy. "Whenever people speak about the throne that I am to occupy, they all say it's a pity that such a fair realm will be in the possession of a monster. If I try to share my crown with a poor girl, she seeks to kill herself or to kill me instead of considering herself happy. If I seek solace for my father and mother, they abhor me and cast nothing but angry looks at me. What am I to do against this despair that grabbed hold of me? I want to leave the court. I shall go to the deepest paths of the forest and lead the life which befits a wild boar of might and spirit. I shall never play the gallant any more. The animals will not reproach me for being uglier than they are. It will be easy for me to be king over them, for I have the advantage of reason, which will serve me as a means of mastering them." Which I like that little line like thrown in there of like, oh, if we have more reason and sophistication, that makes us more human, or it makes us like better than mere animals, which was like another reason why the French also saw themselves like quite a bit above a lot of other people, was they believed that like they're philosophers, they're like courts of reason, they're like their salons, like things like that, like made them more advanced than other even human people, because they were like, oh, we have reason on our side and they don't think the way we do, therefore their thinking is wrong, therefore they're less human than we are. Anyway, so he disappears like into the forest, just like takes off, and the queen, I think this is like really, really telling and interesting. The queen tells people that now, like in the kingdom, no one is allowed to kill wild boars anymore because they don't know whether it's the prince or not. Which that more than anything to me made me realize how much of like a wild boar that he looked like. That it was like the second that he's not wearing royal clothes and that he's like out in the woods running around, unless you stop to talk to him or like and asked him about his philosophy.
Wouldn't be able to tell.
Yeah, you wouldn't be able to tell.
I went back and forth in my mind of picturing, like when he was a baby, I definitely pictured him just like a straight up little piglet boar. And I went back and forth as an adult of picturing him like more anthropomorphized than other moments. Yeah. But anyway, I mean, it's like you kind of had to. It's like if they're at a costume party thing walking around, like I would be able to tell a boar looking boar from a human being.
Even if they were dressed as an ugly astrologer.
Yeah. Especially if they're dressed as an ugly astrologer.
Yeah, for sure. So the mother of Ismene and Zolanide, she also, because she was so upset about her daughter's death, she also didn't want to be in the castle anymore. And so she took her remaining daughter, whose name is not Martha. So she took her remaining daughter, Marthesis, who at this point had grown even more beautiful than all of her sisters who had died. Oh, barf. And her gentle manners had so much time that everyone was always taken with her. Anyway, they also retire, like out into this forest. And he's gone for a really long time, like years. He has just like disappeared and he's gone. One day when Marthesis was walking with her ladies in waiting, not far away from her mother's house, she suddenly came across like a wild boar, and she in terror like froze. The fight, flight, or freeze instinct kicked in. Her ladies in waiting, they ran. They were like, see ya, and took off, and she like just like froze. But then she realized that it was Prince Marcassin who was standing there, and he recognized her, even though he hadn't seen another person for a really long time. He recognized her and went over to her and told her, like, don't have fear. I love you too well to do you any harm. You know what injuries I suffered at the hands of your sisters. What a miserable return for my affection, though I must confess that I did deserve their hatred because of my obstinance in wanting to please and possess them against their will. Which I'm like, oh, learning moment? Did he gain some insight? No.
Too little, too late.
Since I have lived in this forest, I have learned that nothing in the world demands more freedom than the heart. I see that all the animals are happy because they live without constraint. Whatever. So he was like, basically like, Marthesis, come back to my cave with me and tie your fortune to my fortune, where, like, if you promise to marry me, all of the like future that we could have together and like the riches and stuff that were promised to like your sisters, like those could be yours if you come back to the cave with me. And she was like, I know that I am beneath you in terms of like royalty, and I don't dislike you. Your mom wants you to come home. The queen cries every day because she misses you so much. You need to come back to the palace. I'm not going to go with you to your cave. And he's like, no, please come back with me to my cave. Prove to me that you're a good woman who is honest and knows how to like do what's right. And she's like, I don't want to come back with you to your cave because I think that you're going to trap me there. And he's like, I wouldn't. And she's like, here's what I need. I need just a couple days to like think it over before I go with you. And he's like, no, because your ladies in waiting are going to tell your mom that you saw me. And so if you go back, I know I'll never see you again. She's like, no, I promise I will meet you back in this very spot in like 2 days' time. Just trust me. Just believe in me. And so finally he was like, okay, fine. Because she also was like, I can't just disappear into the woods with you and like live with you because like I'm not a wild animal. I can't live in a cave in the woods. Like I do need like clothes to keep me warm. I need like food. Like there's like things that I need. And so like I need to be able to like get those items and stuff. And he's like, I love you, beautiful Marthesis, but you don't love me. It's ambition that would induce you to take me for husband. And I have too much delicacy of feelings to reconcile myself to those sorts of sentiments. And she's like, you're naturally inclined to think ill of our sex, but my Lord Boar, surely it is still something that I promise to cherish a sincere friendship for you. Think about this. You will see me again in a few days at this same place. And so he let her leave, and she was like thinking on it for like a couple days, trying to decide. So meanwhile, he's like going outside and like slaughtering a whole bunch of animals to line his cave with a bunch of like carcasses of animals to like impress this woman. Your man cave does not impress me, bro. Yipes. So she finally like sneaks away to go like meet up with him and to talk with him. And so he was like shocked to see that she like kept her word and like showed back up when she said that she was going to. And he was like, what may I hope from your tenderness? And she's like, you may have great hopes if you decide to return to court. But I confess to you that I do not have the strength to spend the rest of my life cut off from society. Like, I don't want to go back to your weird grotto and live inside of a cave with you. And he was like, oh, I totally understand, but let's just go back to my cave. And she's like, no, I think that you are going...
You're not listening.
Yeah, like, I think that you're going to trap me in your weird grotto. And he's like, no, I'm not going to trap you in my weird grotto. You asked me to trust you and let you go, and I trusted you, and you came back to me. So now it's your time to trust me that I'm not going to trap you in my weird grotto. Oh, Geoff. He's like, come to my grotto and judge for yourself what I shall have to leave for your sake. And so she's like, okay, I'll follow you to your weird grotto. And then he also, thinking that she was afraid and not trusting him, said, don't be afraid. I would never be happy by obtaining my happiness through violence. Which I'm like, bro, that's not true. None of this is true. Anyway, so he brought her back to his weird grotto. And Once he got her in the weird grotto, he blocked the entrance to his weird grotto and trapped her inside.
He lied?
Marthesis trusted his words, and so he led her to the far end of the cave, where she found all the animals he had slaughtered to regale her. This kind of butchery made her sick at heart. And when she turned to try to leave, he blocked her way and was like, "Lovely Marthesis, I have such powerful feelings for you that I do not want you to leave. May the gods bear witness that you will reign in my heart forever. Insurmountable difficulty prevent me from returning to my father the king. Please accept my love and trust here." Trust? Oh my gosh. "Let this flowing stream, these evergreen vines." Trust. "These evergreen vines, this rock, these woods, and all that dwells here bear witness to our mutual oaths."
Ugh.
Oh my gosh. Marthesis was not so desirous of pledging herself as he was, but she was shut inside the grotto without means of getting out. Said, should she not have foreseen what would happen?
Probably. But let's not victim blame here.
Yeah. And she was like, how can I trust your oaths and promises when you've already broken your first one?
Yeah. Good point.
He's like, well, I had to do that. Something human mixed with the animal in me. This breaking of my promise, for which you blame me, this little trick by which I gained my end, these reveal the man in me. To speak frankly, there is more honor among animal than among men. And she said, alas, you have the worst part of both. The heart of a man and the face of a beast.
Sick burn.
I'm like, dang.
That's an insult you could use.
Yeah. You have the worst part of both, the heart of a man and the face of a beast. So she was like, well, now I'm mad at you. And he's like, okay, I understand. But would you stay with me without being my wife? You may take it for granted that I shall not allow you to leave here.
It's like, just assume that I'm not going to let you leave here.
Yeah.
And make your decision based on that. Like, you're not leaving here. So
yeah. Make your decision based on that. I'm like, oh my gosh. So she's just crying and praying, and he's not affected by any of that. So finally, she consented to marry him and assured him that she would love him as fondly as if he were the most charming prince in the world, which, all right, we can all make things up, I guess. What in the world? Like, so he kissed her hand 1,000 times and assured her that she would not be so unhappy as she had reason to think. And then he asked her if she wanted to eat some of the animals that he'd killed and stacked in this weird grotto for her. And she was like, no, actually, I think I'm going to throw up. And he was like, oh, okay, I'll go get you something else. And then, listen, the thing he went to go and get is adorable in like the description, because basically he enlisted the help of several little hedgehogs. And he stuck a bunch of fruits and berries like on the back of these hedgehogs and had them like march into like the grotto to present themselves to her, to like pluck the fruit off of like their backs. And that's adorable and like its imagery, but also I absolutely hate that for her. So he said, here is your wedding feast, not like the feast made for your 2 sisters. Please don't bring up my sisters that died while you're trying to convince me that I'm not unsafe in your weird grotto full of all the carcasses of these animals that you killed to impress me. Oh, men are exhausting. I'm so tired of them. Anyway, so she basically is like resigned herself to her fate of like, well, I guess this is what my life is going to be like right now. Like, it's fine. So after they like ate their food, she was like, all right, so where are we going to sleep? And so she gathered up a bunch of moss and grass and flowers and made a little bed out of it, and then was trying to be nice to him and was basically like, oh, which side do you prefer of the bed? Oh, do you like your pillow like higher or lower, like softer? So she's like asking him questions like about like, oh, how would you like things? And so he's like, oh, I would not change my lot with that of the greatest men. At last I have found what I sought. I am loved by the woman I love. Oh my gosh, the level of delusion in this story is like absolutely baffling to me. So they both fell asleep, and when Marthesis woke up, she had the feeling that her bed was softer than when she had laid down. And then when she touched the boar gently, she found that his head was like a man, and that his hair was long. He had arms and hands like a man. And she could not help wondering what in the world was going on. But she fell back asleep, And when it was daytime, she found that her husband was back to being a boar next to her, like in her bed. So she was like, huh, that's really weird. And so she was kind of like weird to him, like all through the day, because she was like, what happened last night? Like, it was. So when they went to bed, she touched his head while he was asleep and found that like the same change had like come over him, where like she was feeling in the dark of this, like in the back of this grotto, like that it felt like a man and not like a pig. And she was like, that's so weird. But the next morning, it was him again.
It's like a reverse Cupid and Psyche situation.
It wasn't exactly like a Cupid and Psyche situation.
I thought he was like animal at night.
No,
you're right. Yeah. He's a man at night and an animal during the day. You're right.
He's a freak on the streets and a man in the sheets. The best combination? No, I don't know. To each their own. There's a lot of romance novels out there that are, making a lot of money. So, I'm not going to kink shame anybody. But she was like kind of totally weirded out by this. And so she was acting weird to him like during the day. And so he was like, why are you acting like this, Marthesis? Like, don't you love me anymore? Which again, oh gosh, like, did she love him to begin with? Was she coerced into acting nice to him and he mistook that for love? I don't know. Does she have Stockholm syndrome, which isn't real? I don't know. Like, I don't know what's going on. Anyway, so she's like, no, I don't know why you're upset with me, because like you're a deceitful barbarian is what she said to him, which I love. She said, you will be the death of me, which, hey, he's got trauma from that. 2 women he has been the death of. He's got trauma. We're really worried about his trauma. Anyway, so she's like, the wrong that you are doing me affects me deeply and I cannot endure it. And he's like, what wrong are you talking about besides the kidnapping you, of course?
Which I had to do, but after that, I'm not going to do stuff anymore that I don't have to do.
Yeah, unless I want to.
Yeah, and then I have to.
And he's like, what do you mean? Like, I'm a deceitful barbarian. Like, you have no reason to complain. I am nothing but nice to you. Oh, gosh, I struggle. And she's like, you don't think that I know that at night you're replaced by a man in my bed every night? And he's like, wait, what are you talking about? He's like, how dare you claim that I'm like leaving you and putting some strange man in your bed? I'm a very jealous boar. Don't you think that if another man showed up in here, I would just murder him for getting close to you? You think I would allow another man to like touch you? And she's like, I don't know what to think, but things have been weird in bed. And he was like, well, calm down, chill out, be cool. Okay. Nothing is going on. Calm your tits. So she's like, okay, whatever. Like, I can't even with this guy. So she was like, okay, fine. I trust you. But every time she'd wake up in the middle of the night, she would touch the arms and hands and hair of this man, trying to figure out like what was going on. So 6 months passed, it said, with little enjoyment on Marthesis' side, for she never left the cave for fear that she might meet her mother or the servants of her household. Since the poor mother had lost her daughter, she never stopped lamenting. She made the woods resound with her sorrows and with the name of Marthesis, which, ladies listening to her mom crying in the woods, like screaming out her name every day, and I was like, ugh, heaven forbid my mom take me away from this like weird grotto situation where like this guy shapeshifts in the middle of the night, whatever. But once she had discovered that she had become pregnant and she was concerned that the baby would be of the wild boar race, her sorrow knew no bounds. So again, like this like idea of like, oh no, race mixing. Like, what if this baby, now that I'm pregnant with like Prince Marcassin's like baby, what do I do if this baby is like a wild boar? Do I raise this kid? Do I pass on like this genetics? Like, what do I do? So she's like thinking about that. And so at night, she was weeping softly to herself one night when she heard some talking. And she realized that she was currently alone in her bed. And so she heard some talking that was like, no, I will not. And she was like, what? Who is talking? But then she heard the person that was speaking to the prince leave the cave. And then right after that, the wild boar was snoring next to her. It says like a pig, which, yeah. And so she got up and moved the stone that had filled the entrance to the grotto to see if somebody could have like moved it to come in, because she was like, how there was somebody in here who's like talking, like how did they get in here? But she couldn't move the rock that was like in front of the grotto. And so she was like, okay, somebody couldn't have like moved that. Like, I don't know what's going on. And then as she was trying to walk back to bed without any light, she felt something beneath her feet that felt like pigskin, like a pigskin rug. And she was like, what is that? So she picked it up and hid it, and then waited silently for the outcome of the affair. So when dawn had appeared, the man beside her, like the boar that she thought was beside her, got up, and she heard him fumbling around the cave. And while he was searching around, the sun was rising and some light was like peeking through the rock at the end of the grotto, and it lit him up. And she saw that it was this like gorgeously handsome man. And so she was like, oh my gosh, don't continue to make a mystery out of it any longer. I know it. I feel it deep down in my heart. Dear Prince, what good fortune has enabled you to become the handsomest of all men? So at this point, he decides to reveal to her that he's like, oh, yeah. So the whole time that I had you trapped in here and you accused me of like this whole thing, I knew about all of this like the entire time, because when I ran away to the woods after your sister had died, I met some fairies, and they were like, oh my gosh, why is this pig boy crying? And he told them all about it. And they were like, oh, sorry, pig boy, that you be crying.
This is kind of our
yeah,
bad.
this is kind of our bad. What's going on? And he's like, oh, nobody's going to love me, blah, 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 blah. And they're like, oh my gosh, like it's totally fine, because the curse that we put on you was that you had to get married 3 times, and the third wife had to really truly love you and choose to be with you, which
I don't think that came
I
to
don't
fruition.
think it did either. I don't know.
But you know how fairies are. They're all loosey-goosey in the definitions and whatever.
She
their
had to
curses.
really love you. And
like she had to make a real solid college try of it, you know?
And then once you were married to that woman at night, you could take off your pigskin and be a man, but you had to put it on in the morning again before she like woke up. And you had to do that until she discovered for herself that you were taking off your pigskin.
And he's like, that's a little complex, fairies. Why would you go so deep on this?
This is more explanation than any of the like King Pig stories, or even like Hans my Hedgehog get.
Because she's trying to make it make sense.
So the prince is like, anyway, so I've known this whole time what you were talking about when you were saying that, like, why are you a man at night? And he's like, but I couldn't tell you, or like the fairies would make it forever. So where'd you hide my like pigskin? Because I need to put it back on. Which I'm like, didn't you just say that once she figures it out, you don't have to put it back on anyway? So he's trying to put it back on, but it's like magically shrinking, and so he can't get it on.
He just feels more comfortable in his own pigskin.
So it gets down to the size of like a football.
And he chucks it out the window.
So it's like shrinking and shrinking, and he like can't get it on. So he's starting to freak out because he's like, oh, I don't want the fairies to come here and find that I didn't put my pigskin on and they get mad at me, because who knows what they'll do if they think that I'm like not following the rules or whatever. And then all of a sudden they see these like 6 cords, 3 white cords and then 3 black cords like descending down like from the ceiling. And they hear like the fairy's voice being like, the spell would be broken if you can tell us what the 3 white strands and the 3 black strands represent.
What?
I'm like, fairies are always doing some nonsense. And so immediately Marthesis is like, she's like, I think that the 3 white strands represent the 3 fairies that gave you all of these gifts in your life. And the 3 black strands represent the deaths of my 2 sisters and Corydon. And the fairies are like, you're right. And magically, the 3 fairies appear in the grotto, and so do the 2 sisters and Corydon. And they're like, but I thought you were dead. But I thought I killed you. And the fairies are like, haha, stupid mortals. We just made you think that you did. We're so tricksy like that. We made it look like you had murdered her, but you didn't really. We whisked her away, and you were just seeing a figment of your imagination and our spells. Ha ha ha, we're so funny. They got jokes.
Fairies don't know how to
They don't know what human humor is.
No, they're always taking their pranks
Yeah.
way too far.
And also, like, the sisters were like, oh, don't worry, we were never far away, and the prudent fairies were kind enough to take care of us. While you were weeping for our deaths, we were being led into a castle where we lacked for nothing but your company. They're like, it's fine that we were murdered. Because we had fun the whole time while you guys were crying about our deaths that the wild boar caused. And the wild boar was like, wow, I don't think I would have learned how lucky and wonderful my life is if I hadn't gone through such horrible things first. And they're like, yep, us fairies like to make people learn lessons. We're so good at that. So the fairies immediately made the grotto take the form of a superb tent in which the prince found many valets who dressed him in gorgeous attire. And there were attendants for Marthesis too, and a dress of exquisite work. And so then once she was like totally like refrenchificationed, never was there such perfect joy. All the grief the wild boar had suffered did not equal the pleasure of seeing himself not only a man, but a wonderfully handsome man at that. As long as I'm hot. So then several magnificent carriages came with the finest horses, and it took them up to the castle where they were reunited with the king and the queen. The news was carried to the king and the queen, who descended at once to the courtyard. Prince Wild Boar was so much like his father that it would have been difficult to mistake him, and no one did. And never was there more widespread joy. After some months, this was further increased by the birth of a son, in whose face and character there was not a trace of the wild boar. Lots to think about there.
Not really a fan of that ending.
No, throughout the story, it's very listen, it's definitely not my favorite from several different lenses. And
yeah,
another reason too, I think why it's important to talk about the work of Kimberly J. Lau is that stories like this one, I'm not saying that enough work has been done writing about how stories like this were affected by the patriarchy at the time, and about what we can learn about feminist thought and how women were treated in that time, how they viewed themselves. That work is important, and that work is being done, and I think it will probably continue for a while to be done, and that it should. But also there is more budding work happening looking at stories like this from a racial lens. And so it's some of my obviously biggest irritation with this story, and what stops me from finding it enjoyable at all, is the feminist ness of it, of I hate the protagonist of the story. I want nothing good for him because he's so awful.
For sure.
But putting that aside, and then looking at what it also says about how people conceptualized who fit in and who didn't, and why, what people they felt were human and what people they felt were subhuman, and why. That's really interesting to be able to read that story and think about as well.
Putting all of that aside, 3/4 of the story made for a really interesting story in the vein of Game of Thrones or something, where it's just a bunch of horrible people kind of being horrible, and anyone that is not a horrible person is punished because of the cruelty of this world. You know what I mean? The ending doesn't really jive with that, but it's kind of until even kidnapping the third, daughter or whatever. And there's something interesting too, again, in how horrible this character is. It's hard when you have a story that you can't root for the protagonist or whatever, or the main character. But that's why I say it's kind of Games of Thrones kind of a thing. But I mean, he's way worse than any of the people that we're kind of rooting for in Game of Thrones even. But there's even, the element of all men are beasts at heart or whatever, kind of interesting. And if you hadn't framed this in the whole racism aspect at the beginning, I probably wouldn't have noticed, except for in brief moments where I was oh, that's talking about the children and the mixing and calling it creating this race of, even that though I would have been well, they are animal, human, like
Yeah.
something, they are something different. Like I could have totally like missed the racism completely or almost completely. Like there would have been only inklings of it. But it, like we were saying earlier on, it is interesting to look through and then realize that back in the day, this would have been very much about race, very clearly to people.
Yeah.
And then to see like how that informs, like you said, it informs me what they thought about race and how specifically they were racist against other people and what they thought, which interesting, but also terrible, like sad that that's like how it was back then. But
and one thing that I think is really interesting, like to talk about, like going back to like what I had said, like, oh, we will talk more about like their ideas of how you could kind of like dilute the heritage of somebody else kind of like out of them. There is this idea that if men could marry somebody else that was like outside of their race as they conceptualized it, that like it would make more sense for a man to have a wife who was a Native American woman. And then it was believed, okay, then their children could be raised French. Their kids could be taught by this like strong man leading the family. Like he could then make the family more French. Like that would be successful.
Right.
Like and their ideas, they were like a French woman couldn't marry like a Native American man and have French children, because of course the way that their minds were thinking in terms of like patriarchy was like a man is the head of his house and he's going to like lead them forward, which is why it's like even more like upsetting to them that there's like this wild pig man trying to marry these like beautiful French women, because it's like obviously what's going to happen is you're going to just have more of these like wild boar children, even though that doesn't make sense, which again, like the king saying to like his wife, I don't blame you like for this kid, even though it carried out through the story that it was like the belief that like no, this is hereditary in some way. And then it's like, but you don't think that was anyway.
It is interesting, and it's a weird and again sad demonstration of like how the society in that time and place like treated women and different races, and the weird loops that have to be gone through when the situation you're saying is like, well, like men are better than women and like Europeans are better than the non-Europeans.
Yeah.
But when you have like a man who's not European over a woman who is European, it's like they can't do the balancing right. So it's like a weird like misfiring happens in their brain because they're like, they just can't comprehend how, you know what I mean? Like, not that it's just like they have to make a reason for it to be.
Yeah, no, especially
they have to like justify it in a weird.
Yeah. Especially
kind of
when
way.
they viewed themselves as like very reasoned people that like, oh, we're not just saying this, there's a reason behind it. Like there's like kind of almost like a science behind like what we're saying. Like this is clear logic to people, because like 50-ish years after like this story was written, it became like illegal for French people to be marrying and having children with people who were Native American, because what actually ended up happening was that Frenchmen who went over to the Americas to be like fur trappers, they were falling in love with Native American women, being essentially like absorbed or adopted into the tribes there, having families and raising their kids within those family social structures.
Yeah.
And so people back in France were like, okay.
They weren't fans of the defrenchification.
Yeah, it was a defrenchification that was happening. It was a loss of French culture that they were seeing. And they were like, this didn't work out the way that we thought that it would, that we thought that like a patriarchal man would basically, and it's like, no, because as it would turn out, if the women are raising the children, the women are going to raise the children in the family system and the family culture that makes the most sense for where their family is. If they're living with their family in America near like all of their like on their ancestral land with all of their kinfolk there, why would they raise them French? That doesn't make any sense. Like that's not what is actually like going to happen.
Yeah. And it is interesting too, because like you said about them being reasoned, considering themselves to be reasoned, there is like a consistent internal logic to what they're saying that makes sense, but it's founded on faulty assumptions and like presuppositions of how the world is, you know. It's like the Boar Prince was saying, like, if you like just assume that you're not going to be leaving here because that's what is like true, you know, like assume that these things are true and then make your logic out after that. It's like, okay, well, that's the logic that would be produced. That makes sense, but it's like all built on something that is not true. So it doesn't actually play out that way in the real world, which is good to know.
Yeah.
And good to see. Anyway, entertaining, enlightening, disturbing.
Yeah.
Many adjectives could be said about this story, but I'll leave it with those.
So I just want to leave with a last quote from Specters of the Marvelous. Prince Marcassin is more than the universal, uncivilized other of the French imagination. Rather, he is a very specific other whose story condenses the dominant cultural fantasy of colonization as civilizing mission.
Thank you for listening to The Fairy Tellers. If you enjoy what we're doing, please leave us a review or share us with your friends. For access to exclusive bonus content, consider supporting us on Patreon at patreon.com/thefairytellers. Special thanks to Andy Forey for our music and to Clarice Inch for our artwork. And of course, a big thank you to all our patrons. Without all of you, this show wouldn't be possible.
Good stories pay little attention to cultural or linguistic frontiers. The student of story collections find themselves adrift on an ocean of stories, an ocean which is boundless, deep, and ceaseless in motion. Robert Irwin.
Think it was the bean chili that I ate? Yes, I do.
Like I do, Katrina. I think it was all that being chilly.